Thank you, IoT Asia, for inviting us today to talk about driving new generation urban farming with integrated IoT platform. So I want to start with a quote by Peter Drucker: "You cannot manage what you cannot measure." IoT systems, in essence, is helping you to measure what is happening on the farm on very granular basis, individual data points, allowing you to know what is happening exactly on the ground. Now, the same concept has been implemented for smart cities, all the way up to smart agriculture. And that is where we believe the next phase of agriculture will continue to grow and have a lot more prospects to it. A quick introduction about ourselves. We are a drones and smart sensors company. We are based in Singapore. We are doing in mostly Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and of course, Singapore. So we've done quite a bit of mapping using drones, spraying using drones. We have implemented smart sensors for water tracking, GPS trackings, and many others, with over 50 clients in Southeast Asia. So some of our major customers include Sienna Mars Group, Golden Agri, Asian Agri, some of the most major plantations in this region. So let's talk about why IoT in agriculture. So how can IoT help farming? IoT essentially captures data points that human manually can do so, but in an automated manner. Now, being able to track what's happening on the ground is important because previously, without these solutions, it's a lot about trial and error. It's a lot about guesswork. There is no fundamental, rigorous study on how it could be optimized and improved to make it better. So with IoT solutions, which all starts with collection of data points. Now, previously, a lot of data points are manually written, and then hopefully to make some sense out of it, which means many of the important data points are often left out. Now, the second part of collecting data is to transmit the information. In Singapore, in urban landscape, we commonly talk about Wi-Fi. We use Wi-Fi for transmission in your house, likewise in warehouses, and many others. But that's not the only solution that's available in the market. In fact, it's probably one of the worst to use Wi-Fi for farming because farming requires space, it requires low power, it requires low maintenance. And Wi-Fi is not the best solution for it. There's many other alternatives around in the market right now. You have BLE, Bluetooth 5. You have Zigbee, which is most commonly used for house IoT devices. And for ourselves, we are using LoRa, which is intended for long range in a slightly more large scale kind of plantations. Now, with all this information coming back to processing, to visualize this data, that's where we are all familiar with business insights, your BI tools, and then your AI tools to make better sense out of it, to automate, and to predict what's going to happen. So a little more technical on how it actually can be implemented. You have all your sensors, typically that you have seen. You have sensors from temperature, soil moisture, object tracking, water tracking, and so on. Now, all these are not new in the market. Sensors has been around for the past 100 years. What is different now is to be able to automatically collect the data, correlate, and make better sense of this information. Now, that's where the cloud, the data analytics comes in. We transmit the information via the gateways. Now, the gateways, you can imagine it are your house routers where it is a central point for connectivity. In every farming environment, you require that. Apart from Singapore, where there is a possibility of using NB-IoT, which is opened up by the telecoms around, we commonly require to deploy our own connectivity network within a small farm. And that is how it can be done. Transmit the information and feed it into your mobile apps. So what can IoT help to decrease in the cost? Now, IoT is not the magic bullet for all solutions around, but it is able to help reduce costs on a significant portion, including tracking your fertilizers use, reducing and early prevention of pest attacks, protecting your crops, and of course, irrigation and storage. So in most cases, if you're building a new farm, you could jump straight away into optimization, skipping through phase 1, 2, and 3. But in most farms, quite commonly, we are seeing manual processes throughout the entire farm, even within Singapore. So if I were to break it down, it will be in 3 major phases. Number 1, to monitor. You need to know what is happening before you can improve. Number 2, once you know what is happening, you can automate the processes because you need trigger points for automation. And finally, you can optimize and reduce the cost that is being used for the agriculture. So we start with monitoring. Now, monitoring is straightforward. As all of us can imagine, we have used a sensor at a certain point of time. A sensor picks up data specific to what it's intended use for. In agriculture, the most basic that we have ever come across is soil moisture. Every different kind of crop, every different kind of vegetable requires its own unique sweet spot for soil moisture. So measuring soil moisture is a no-brainer in most cases. Being able to track how it has varied throughout the day, different timing, especially in a slightly outdoor environment, on the car parks, on top of the buildings, even in gardens. So we don't only talk about urban setting where it's a fully indoor environment. In many cases, indoor environment is very expensive, and therefore we have to look at partial outdoor environment, something like this, where you have greenhouse protected, but at the same time, it is still exposed to the elements in a certain way. So over here, we are tracking at the same time humidity, temperature, knowing what's happening on the ground again, having historical data of what's happening on the ground, measuring the water quality, so the inputs of the water flowing into the crops. If it's too acidic, if it's too alkaline, you need to treat it beforehand. So very commonly, especially for new farmers, when they come in, they don't track all this information. And then they wonder why the crop is not doing just as well. These are one of very fundamental reasons that information about this, monitoring it so that you can do something about it is very crucial. You'll be surprised how much of all these sensors are able to track. It's able to track in your oxygen level in the water, pH, your salinity, which is also an indicator of how much fertilized and how well the concentration of a fertilizers has been mixed into the soil, or in hydroponics case, the liquid that you're feeding it. So your weather stations in partial environment, you want to track how much rainfall, the wind direction, the temperature, barometrics, and so on. So dashboards is the basics of all business analytics. You want to know what's happening, then you can correlate the data against your yield to see what is driving or causing the most problems around. Now, there's a lot more advanced technology that is being deployed now, not just having a basic sensor, but doing in-depth analysis. So in this case, this is not our technology, of course, it's from Europe. It's to monitor the pathogens within the soil. Now, in cases like Singapore, where the water has been treated significantly, you usually don't have these problems. But moving to other parts of Southeast Asia, the water source can come from the nearest river, which might not be treated. And having this kind of solutions is able to pick up early pathogens before it's being introduced into your farm or nursery. And once it is being introduced, it's a lot harder to treat. So with that, once we know what's happening on the ground, the second part and the most important part, I think, to reduce costs is on automation. So you don't want to rely on manpower all the time. You want to automate. And manpower in agriculture has always been one of the fundamental problems that is causing yield issues. You are not able to maximize the operations because you don't have enough people. Understandably so, because in urban settings, there's a lot better job out there. In most cases for farms, you're dealing with somewhat nasty environment under the sun, dealing with soil, things that not everyone is very comfortable doing. So we try to automate a lot of processes, and not just that, we are able to get a lot more precise control over what happens on the ground. So in this is a case where we are automating a nursery in Indonesia so that we can provide irrigation and spraying without the use of manpower. Now, first, going back to phase one, we want to track what's happening on the ground. We want to maintain the soil moisture within the set limit. This, of course, varies from crop to crop. In this case, we are looking around 30 to 40%. And over here, we are trying to spray at different points. So with the soil moisture, it's able to pick on which area has under sprayed and which area is too wet. You don't want to be spraying blanket throughout the entire place. Number one, it's a waste of water. Number two, it's going to cause the crop to be damaged. You don't want them to be water soaked. You don't want them to be too dry. Now, this whole process can be fully automated, which is what we are doing here. We're setting it up by tracking how much water has been in each area, and then being able to deploy the sprinklers to the specific spot and spraying on the right place. Now, coming to the other part, we are a drone company, so of course we have to bring in some of the technology that we are deploying in Indonesia. Over here, we are looking at multi-spectral cameras. Now we are trying to pick out pests and diseases problems before it ever becomes too severe. Now, this is a case of sugarcane. This solution has not been well adopted in urban setting yet, but we believe that there is a lot of potential to be deployed there because you can automate this entire process of pest detection, not just on visual cameras, but on using multi-spectral spectrums to be able to pick on these pest early attacks and then to see that these plants are under stress. Now, if you're able to isolate, quarantine, and treat the problems as early as possible, we're going to be able to save a lot of costs for the farmers. So a quick one from how spraying drones are able to help reduce the cost. Again, coming back to the same problem of not enough manpower. Even in countries which are considered relatively low cost, we are looking at significant shortage of manpower, up to 50% in certain areas. And that's the reason why drones and robotics have taken off significantly in this part of the region. Now, coming back, drawing our attention back into an urban settings, this is how usually you will see a farm in Singapore going to be laid out. Your vegetables on a tray and rack. We could also optimize the growth of these plants up to minute level. So the pink light that you see here is essentially growth stimulation lights. It stimulates the growth, and it can be optimized based on the age of the plant, the age of the vegetables, the type of vegetables it is undergoing, and when it's going to be harvested, you can crank it out a bit further. So all this can be automated with a solution as long as we're able to track what stage is it going to be and what is the most optimum value with this. And you'll be surprised that in a lot of planting technology nowadays, there is no prescribed one answer fit all for everyone. Because there's so much variables that comes in. You have your mechanization technology coming from all over the world. You have different species of vegetables, you have different genomes that you have, and all of it does not equate into a single instruction booklet that do A, B, C, and you get the optimal output. It does not work like this in agriculture. It's an evolving process. Everyone has its own secret sauce. Everyone is trying to learn, improve, and optimize the business that they have. And that's the reason why without the data points created by IoTs, if you're not able to track and monitor what are the inputs that have been given, you'll never be able to reduce the cost and never be able to optimize the output. So coming to one of the final points in automation, unfortunately, and IoT will not be able to solve all the problems in the market. Some of the most fundamental issue here is harvesting. And harvesting, up till now, there's many crops that cannot be automatically harvested. This is one of the rare cases and a very expensive system designed in Israel to harvest apples. But unfortunately, coming back to certain fruits that you have, for example, strawberries, which is very commonly planted in urban setting, high value crop, automation is still quite a challenging process, and it still comes back to manpower, which points us down to the last point. We should not be looking at IoT as a magic bullet to solve all the problems, but we can optimize and reduce costs in many ways. Now, one of the problems with agriculture, farm to table, is that the entire supply chain does not just revolve around farming. It is not just the plants itself. All of us are looking at it in a silo, but to bring a fruit from farm all the way to the dining table of end consumer, there's many other parties involved, including a logistics company, your storage, your warehouse, and finally your retailers. Now, all this process, if we're able to map it out, combine them, we're able to optimize it significantly. Now, one of the things that we are looking at is knowing when to harvest. When the consumer says that I want the fruit now, we should be able to anticipate how much time it takes for the logistic company to bring the fruits to the retailers, to the end user house, the consumers. And knowing when to harvest is an important part of it, because the longer you store, the more expensive it becomes. The longer you store, the lower the quality of the fruit. You have a pest infestation. You have your over-ripening. Or if you harvest it too early, the quality of the fruit is not as good. So those are the parts that is there is a lot of potential to be improved on. Over here, if you see the purple light over there, what we're trying to do is we're trying to measure what's the ripeness of the pineapples without any intrusive action done to it. So we preserve the fruit while knowing what's the condition of it. Does it have any pest infestation inside? Is it of high quality? And most importantly, is it sweet or not? So with all these solutions that we have implemented, I think IoT will definitely be taken in a much larger scale than what it is currently. And if we are able to connect the dots between different parts of the supply chain, we are looking at much better output for the farms and the better and more sustainable returns for the end consumer to purchase. So that's what I have to discuss today about IoT, driving new generation urban farming with integrated IoT platform. Thank you very much.